When I questioned my college savings, my mother replied flatly, "I handed it to your brother because men need degrees and women need husbands." Can you even imagine watching your own mother, the woman who raised you, sign a massive check with the money your dead father left specifically for your education, and hand it to your utterly useless stepbrother? All while telling you that you're just going to get married and waste your intelligence? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And it was just the beginning of a betrayal that would change my entire life. I stood there, clutching my acceptance letter to engineering school. A full-ride scholarship. A dream come true. But even a full ride isn't everything, you know? I still needed $8,000 for housing and books. Just $8,000. That money? It was mine. My dad had left it for my education in his will before he passed. But my mother, she didn't even glance up. She was at the kitchen table, writing Brandon's name on a check for $40,000. For my stepbrother Brandon, who had already flunked out of community college not once, but twice. Her pen scratched across the paper, and then she spoke, her voice flat, emotionless. "Your father would understand. Brandon needs this opportunity. He's going to be a provider someday. You're just going to get married and waste that degree." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Brandon was 22 and had never held a job for more than a week in his life. He'd spent the last 3 years living in our basement, playing video games, and calling it networking. Meanwhile, I was pulling a 4.0 GPA while working 2 jobs, heading to aerospace engineering. He wanted to study business because he thought it sounded easy. My mother finally looked at me, a coldness in her eyes I still sometimes see in my nightmares. Exactly. Business leads to money. Engineering for girls leads to nothing because no man wants a wife smarter than him. You'll be 30 and alone with cats. Then, with a sickening flourish, she handed Brandon the check. He didn't even try to hide his smirk. "Thanks, Mom," he drawled, looking directly at me. Someone understands that men have real pressure to succeed. Women just have to look pretty. I was seething. This was the same Brandon who'd failed basic algebra 4 times. The one who rarely showed up to class, and when he did, he was high as a kite. But my mother? She saw him as a victim. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "The system is biased against boys. Teachers favor girls. Everyone knows that. Brandon never had a fair chance. Female teachers are threatened by strong male energy." Brandon, ever the victim, nodded along. "She's right. My female teachers were jealous of my potential. That's why they failed me. Mrs. Johnson even said I didn't turn in homework, but she probably lost it on purpose. I couldn't take it anymore. They failed you because you never showed up. And you were high half the time." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I need that money for housing. I'll be homeless at college without it." She actually laughed. A cold, dismissive sound. "Then don't go. Stay here. Get married to Todd from church. He owns a lawn care business. He can provide while you have babies." Todd. 40 years old. Divorced 3 times, each for domestic violence. And he was her idea of a catch for me. Something snapped. "Fine," I choked out. "I'll figure it out myself then." But she wasn't done. She grabbed my arm, her grip shockingly tight. "You're not going anywhere. If you leave for college without our blessing, you're not welcome back. We'll rent your room to Brandon's friend, Kyle. He needs it more. He's starting a business." Kyle. 30 years old, sold drugs out of his van. An entrepreneur. You're choosing Brandon's drug dealer friend over your daughter? Over me? The words were raw, torn from my throat. Then Rick, her boyfriend, stepped in, getting right in my face. His breath smelled stale and angry. Kyle's a businessman going through a rough patch. You're just a girl playing at being special. Learn your place. That night, I packed every single thing I owned. Which wasn't much, because Brandon had been systematically taking my things and selling them for years. My mother's reasoning? Sharing is caring, and boys need money more. I left at dawn, 2 suitcases and $300 I'd hidden from Brandon's greedy hands. As I walked out the door, my mother's voice followed me, cutting through the morning silence. When you fail, don't expect sympathy. Those words became my fuel. College was a nightmare of relentless struggle. I worked 4 jobs. I lived in a tiny closet that someone illegally rented to me until it got condemned. For months, my car was my home. I ate 1 meal a day, sometimes less, and lost 20 pounds by sophomore year. I studied in 24-hour laundromats and diners, the only places open where I wouldn't get kicked out, because campus housing was a luxury I couldn't afford. And every single month, without fail, my mother would call. Not to ask how I was doing. Oh no. She called to give me updates on Brandon's latest endeavors. Brandon dropped out again, but we're paying for online classes. He learns better from home. The professor was discriminating against him for being male. The professor was male. He crashed the car, but we bought him a truck. Men need reliable transportation for opportunities. He crashed that truck 2 weeks later, driving drunk. That was the bar's fault for overserving him, apparently. We're converting the garage to a studio apartment for Brandon. He needs his own space at 26. Privacy is important for men. While I was literally sleeping in my car. Brandon's girlfriend is pregnant, but don't worry, we're supporting them both. Men need help starting families. She left when she found out he had 2 other girlfriends, but my mother still sent the money. Through all of it, I just worked harder. I refused to fail. And I didn't. I graduated with honors. NASA recruited me. I was making 6 figures at 23. My mother called when she heard through family gossip. You should help Brandon. He's struggling to find himself. You owe us for giving you life. I hung up. Then Brandon called. It's not fair. You had advantages. Being a woman in STEM means quotas. I'm discriminated against as a white man. Nobody helps men succeed anymore. This man had never applied to a single STEM program. Or any job, for that matter. A year later, they contacted me again. Brandon, with their retirement funds, had started yet another business. It failed in 2 months. They were broke. You need to support us. We're your family, my mother sobbed down the phone. Brandon tried his best, but the economy is against men right now. You got lucky being female. Lucky, that word hit a nerve so deep, it reverberated. You gave him my college fund, I said, my voice dangerously calm. He can support you. My mother started crying harder. That was different. He needed that chance. How were we supposed to know he'd waste it? Boys mature more slowly. He needed more chances. They knew. Everyone knew. Brandon had wasted every single opportunity since birth. How much did you give him, total? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My mother's reply was almost inaudible. $212,000. My engineering brain kicked in, cold and calculating. $40,000 for the first failed attempt. $30,000 for the second. $20,000 for the online classes he never finished. $15,000 for his 2-month business idea. $50,000 for the final, catastrophic business. Cars, trucks, legal fees, garage conversion, his girlfriend's expenses, 8 years of free rent and food. All while I slept in my car. My entire 4-year degree, with housing, books, meal plans, everything, would have cost $90,000. They had given Brandon enough money to send me through undergrad twice, and still have $32,000 left over for a master's program. $90,000, I said, cutting off whatever excuse she was making. My voice sounded flat, cold, like I was presenting calculations to my team at NASA. That's what my degree cost total. You gave Brandon $212,000. That's enough to fund my education 2.35 times over. My mother launched into a fresh wave of tears and justifications. I let her talk for 10 seconds, maybe 15, before I cut her off. You chose to fund 8 years of failure instead of 4 years of proven success. I had a 4.0 GPA and 2 jobs. Brandon had failed basic algebra 4 times and never held a job for more than a week. You saw the numbers. You made a choice. That choice tells me exactly what you value. And it isn't merit, or hard work, or evidence. It's just gender. Her tactics switched instantly. The crying grew louder, and she started talking about the house. They were going to lose it. Brandon's failed business had taken their retirement fund with it. They had nothing left. Then Rick's voice came on the line, sharp and demanding. You need to help us. Family takes care of family. You're the only one with money now. I almost laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Where was that family loyalty when you told me I was just a girl playing at being special? When you threatened to rent my room to Kyle so he could sell drugs from my childhood bedroom? When you got in my face and told me to learn my place? Silence. Complete, total silence on the other end. I could hear my mother sobbing in the background, but Rick said nothing. The silence was satisfying. Like finally winning an argument I'd been having in my head for years. Then I heard a snatch, and Brandon's voice filled the void. This is such bullshit. You know the system is rigged against white men. You only got hired because of diversity quotas. NASA had to hire women. I actually had to compete on merit, and nobody gave me special treatment. The economy is designed to favor women now. Everyone knows that. I let him talk. He went on for at least 2 minutes, blaming everything and everyone, his teachers, professors, the economy, society, women in general. He took zero responsibility. Not for the dropped classes, the crashed vehicles, the failed business, the 8 years in their basement. It was everyone else's fault. When he finally stopped, I waited a few more seconds, just to be sure. You had $212,000 in advantages, I said, my voice cold and steady. Plus free housing for 8 years, free food, a car, then a truck, then another car. Legal representation. Emotional support. Everyone telling you that you were special and just needed more time. I had $300 and a closet someone rented to me illegally until the building got condemned. Then I had my car. Then I had nothing but laundromat floors and 24-hour diners where I could study without getting kicked out. If you couldn't succeed with $200,000 in support, the problem isn't diversity quotas or the economy or female teachers being threatened by your potential. The problem is you. My mother grabbed the phone back. She was begging now, her voice high-pitched and desperate. They truly believed Brandon would succeed, she cried. They thought he'd pay them back. They were investing in his future. How could they have known it wouldn't work out? They'd had faith in him. Belief without evidence is just delusion, I said. Especially after the first $100,000 produced zero results. You kept going. You kept funding failure. That wasn't faith. That was willful blindness. Because admitting you were wrong would have meant admitting you wasted my college fund on nothing. Rick got back on the phone. His voice was different now. Less demanding. More threatening. If you don't help us, we'll tell everyone in the family that you abandoned us. That you have money, and you're letting us lose our house. Everyone will know what kind of daughter you really are. I laughed out loud again. This time, it wasn't bitter. It was almost joyful. Go ahead. Tell them. Those same family members already know I work at NASA because that's how you found out in the first place, remember? Mom heard through family gossip. They'll ask where the money went. You'll have to explain the $212,000. They'll do the same math I just did. They'll figure out real fast that you had enough money to save the house twice over, but you gave it all to Brandon instead. Tell them, please. I'd love to hear how that conversation goes. I took a breath. That $8,000 you wouldn't give me? It would have changed everything. I wouldn't have slept in my car for 2 years. I wouldn't have eaten one meal a day and lost 20 pounds my sophomore year. I wouldn't have studied in laundromats at 3 a.m. because I had nowhere else to go. But you chose to give Brandon his 5th chance instead. Now you want me to fund your retirement after you funded all his failures. The answer is no. My mother's crying grew louder, more desperate. She kept saying she was sorry, she didn't know it would turn out this way, they thought Brandon would succeed. You gave him $40,000 for his first failed attempt at college, I reiterated, calmly. Then another $30,000 for the second. Then $20,000 for the online classes he never finished. Then $15,000 for his business idea that lasted 2 months. Then $50,000 for his actual business that failed even faster. Then cars and legal fees and living expenses for 8 years. You had choices at every single point. After the first failure, you could have stopped. After the second, definitely. But you kept going because admitting you were wrong would have meant admitting you wasted my college fund on nothing. Then her voice shifted, from desperate to angry, righteous. She said my father would be ashamed of me for abandoning family. That he raised me better. That family helps family no matter what. Something ice-cold settled in my chest. Dad left that money specifically for my education. He wrote it in his will. He wanted me to go to college and study engineering because he knew I loved math and science. You took that money and gave it to Brandon instead. You stole from Dad's wishes. You stole from me. So, you don't get to speak for him anymore. You don't get to tell me what he would think. You already showed what you think his wishes were worth. Rick grabbed the phone again, yelling about respect and gratitude, how I owed them everything. I talked over him, my voice calm, steady, which only seemed to make him angrier. I'm going to hang up now. I'm blocking all your numbers. If you try to contact me through other family members, I'll block them, too. If you show up at my work, I'll call security and get a restraining order. You made your choices. You chose Brandon over me every single time. You chose his comfort over my basic needs. You chose his failures over my success. Now you get to live with those consequences, the same way I lived with mine. Rick started yelling louder about how I was being dramatic and cruel and selfish. I kept talking, my voice unwavering. You lived with me sleeping in my car and eating one meal a day and working 4 jobs. You knew I was struggling and you kept sending Brandon money instead. You made your choices. These are the consequences. My mother grabbed the phone back one last time. She was begging again, throwing out every guilt trip she could think of. I waited for her to run out of words. Mom, I said, and a strange sense of peace settled over me. You were right about one thing. I'm 30 now. But I'm not alone with cats like you predicted. I have a career I love at NASA. I work on spacecraft systems. I'm respected by my colleagues. I built this life entirely without your help. Actually, I built it despite you actively trying to stop me. So, thanks for the motivation, I guess. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down on my kitchen counter. I stood there for a minute, just breathing, staring at the phone like it might ring again. It didn't. My apartment was quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming, traffic outside, and my own heartbeat in my ears. I felt strange. Relieved, yes, but also angry and sad and vindicated all at once. My chest felt tight, and my hands wouldn't stop trembling. But I also felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy for years and finally put it down. I kept expecting to feel guilty, to second-guess myself, but I didn't. I just felt tired, and profoundly sad about the family I wished I'd had instead of the one I got. I spent the rest of the evening blocking their numbers. My mother's cell, Rick's cell, their home phone, Brandon's old number I'd blocked years ago but apparently unblocked at some point. Then I went through my email and blocked all their addresses. Then I called the front desk of my apartment building. The security guard knew me. I explained I had family drama and needed to add 3 names to the list of visitors not allowed up. He was professional, no questions asked. I gave him their names and descriptions. It felt dramatic, but necessary. Rick had a history of showing up uninvited and causing scenes. The next morning at work, I told my supervisor. She's in her 50s, 20 years at NASA, direct and fair. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she simply nodded. Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon. She'd seen it happen to other successful people at NASA. Family members who didn't support them on the way up suddenly wanted help once they made it. She said she'd alert security and reception, and if I needed time off, to let her know. I felt a wave of gratitude for that stable, supportive work environment. Over the next week, my phone was a constant buzz of unknown numbers. Voicemails from extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles. My mother had clearly recruited everyone she could to guilt me. They all said the same thing: family should help family. You're being selfish. Your mother is desperate. I wrote out a single, detailed message explaining the full financial history, the $212,000, 8 years of support for Brandon, his complete lack of contribution, and the $8,000 they refused to give me. I sent it to everyone who called. Most went quiet. A few sent short messages saying they didn't know the full story. One cousin called me a liar. I blocked her and moved on. Then my aunt called. Not one of my mother's recruits. This was my dad's sister, someone I hadn't talked to in years because my mother had cut off that side of the family after Dad died. She left a voicemail saying she'd heard everything and wanted to talk. I called her back that evening. We talked for almost an hour. She apologized for losing touch, explaining my mother had made it clear Dad's family wasn't welcome. She then told me that several family members were actually furious with my mother now that they knew the real numbers. Apparently, my mother had been asking them for small amounts of money for emergency expenses and medical bills, money that likely went to Brandon. My uncle had even called my mother, telling her to take responsibility. A few days later, my aunt called again with an update. My mother and Rick were facing foreclosure. The bank had started proceedings. Brandon was couch surfing because there was no room for him in their new, small two-bedroom apartment. My aunt asked if I felt bad. I thought about it. Honestly. I feel sad for them, I said. Losing your home is hard, regardless. But I don't feel responsible. They made consistent choices over 8 years that led directly to this outcome. They chose to give Brandon over $200,000 for nothing. They chose to threaten and manipulate me instead of taking responsibility. These are the consequences of their decisions, not mine. My aunt understood. A year after cutting contact, I was truly thriving. Not just surviving. I was leading a major project at NASA involving satellite communications. I had strong friendships with people who valued me for me. I felt secure in ways that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with being surrounded by respect. The anger had faded into acceptance. Some people just never change. And that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I started mentoring younger engineers, especially women who reminded me of my younger self. When they shared their family struggles or doubts, I told them the truth. Sometimes the family you build for yourself is the one that matters most. Success is the best response to people who never believed in you. I still have complicated feelings about everything. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for the relationship I could have had with my mother. Sometimes, the anger over that $8,000 still flares. But mostly, I feel profoundly grateful for the life I've created despite everything. I have work I love, and people who genuinely care about me. I proved wrong everyone who said I'd fail or that education was wasted on women. That feels like the real victory. Not the money or the title, but the genuine happiness I've built entirely on my own terms. Tell me, what would you have done if you were me? Have you ever had to choose yourself over toxic family? I really want to hear your stories in the comments below.